So today we're going to very broadly talk about the idea of trust as a business cost and a business asset, and how we're using transformational technologies to make this transition. And with me are two Indicio advisors. Will Groah has a deep expertise in technology and venture investing. Tom is at the cutting edge of identity and biometrics and border security. Both are members of K Street Capital, which has as its goal of spotting the future before it hits everybody else in the face. And before we delve into our topic, I'll give them both an opportunity to say something much fuller and more interesting about themselves than my extremely brief capsule summaries. Will.
Okay, so go first. Yeah, thanks, Trevor, and good to see you, Tom. Thanks for that intro. Just a little background for me. I'm Will Groah. I'm based in Sarasota, Florida. Most of the time, I'm in my third career. Probably my most favorite because I get to work with startup founders and venture capital and angel syndicates, and just get to see a lot of innovation come through. Formerly, I'm a post-exit founder, so I have all the scars that go along with building a company up from scratch. That was in the defense and intelligence sector with a heavy bent on cybersecurity. So great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Will, it's great to join you and to have the chance to talk for one of the first times, kind of face to face, so to speak. I didn't realize you were down in Sarasota, so we'll have to do this next one in person in your hometown because A, gorgeous town, B, gorgeous weather coming up here soon. So
Yeah.
we get the chance to do that. Trevor, Helen, Tim, thank you for arranging and thanks for the opportunity to connect. Trevor, looking forward to this conversation. As asked or as mentioned, my name is Tom Plofchan. I'm serving as a senior advisor to a DCO as of the start of this year. My background is really in the nexus of border security, travel, and technology, with a bit of policy on that side of it from earlier in my career. If we go back to kind of the first part of my career, just because it may become relevant later in the conversation, I also worked for Deloitte's financial advisory practice for a number of years before entering into CBP, Customs and Border Protection, and DHS, where I spent a good bit of my time on data and how data was used in the counterterrorism missions and the targeting missions, as well as ultimately how other technologies could be incorporated into the DHS mission set, a large part of which, as you know, through CBP and TSA, includes travel and cross-border movements. Got out of DHS in 2020, and with a number of colleagues from that previous decade of my life, started a company called Pangeum. And Pangeum primarily served in the digital identity space, computer vision company with, at the time, the fastest and most accurate Western-built facial recognition algorithm that existed on the market, and a number of deployments across the aviation sector. So to make that tangible, think about when you board a plane internationally bound in the United States these days. In most major international airports in the US, they no longer ask for your passport, instead they take your picture. That's a product that we built and grew at Pangeum over the course of the time that we were there. Probably our most customer-facing product, but I give that as an example of the nexus of identity, biometrics in that space, and the travel continuum. Looking forward to the conversation and happy to be helpful in any way we can.
Great. So normally or very often in these meetups, we have very technical discussions with, and this really tries to draw this discussion is to try and draw the business significance from all of this technology. And with that in mind, I want to get on a little soapbox and talk about what do we mean by digital transformation? Because the technologies we're discussing right now, I think, are more than just products. They represent fundamental changes in the way we handle identity and we handle information. So at that level, we are bringing about transformation, just as, in 1844, Samuel Morse, using what might be an early form of binary code, sent a message from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, which said, "What had God wrought?" And what's interesting at the time is people aren't quite sure, they're amazed that this is happening, but not quite sure what it means. And then very shortly, it becomes apparent that this is a way to facilitate arbitrage because you can now know the prices of goods and markets near instantly. So you have a massive transformation of business by, the ability to, by taking the letters of the alphabet and turning them into a binary code with, of course, the great innovation being that Morse saw that E was the most used letter in the alphabet. And so that got a dot. And then T was the second most used, and that got a dash. And from there, you could create this incredibly efficient form of communication, which fundamentally was able to eliminate kind of noise and uncertainty so that you could know information rapidly. And that's the kind of underlying change that happened. But think about what that change wrought. It meant you could cross the United States with rail line. It's too expensive. You could not afford the steel to build a railway line there for a train going and a railway line coming back. But if you used the telegraph to create a timetable and signaling, you could effectively crisscross the United States on a single track. What happens next? You have the opening up of a vast market to goods and services. You have, the flywheel of technology and business, creates more business, more technology, more business, more technology. You refrigerate container trucks. So now from oranges from Sarasota, Florida can be consumed in Chicago, and meat from Chicago can be consumed in Florida, making the U.S. population the best fed in the world. And I have a little bit of background in nutrition history, so that is actually true. But then you also have, if information can be reduced to a code, to a binary code that's super efficient, you can wire money. So you had Western Union in 1871, you were able to wire the first money. Then you have how do you send a signal across the Atlantic and deal with salt water being highly conductive? Well, you eventually come up with information theory, which ultimately gives us this Zoom call that we're having today. So what we see over the course of 180 years is efficiency, reducing uncertainty, creating more efficiency, reducing more uncertainty. And the question is, have we actually reached one of this, a tipping point where we need a new transformational technology to deal with the noise and uncertainty that remain in our digital interaction, our entire communication system, because let's face it, our entire communication system is largely digital. And that noise is fundamentally not knowing who you're talking to, or you're not really able to know who you're talking to. And you don't really know whether the information has been altered between the point of, during the course of its exchange. So we have all of this uncertainty. And in this sense, verifiable identity and verifiable data are more than just a product. They're a way to create that similar kind of efficiency that creates all new ways of doing business. Comments?
Yeah, Trevor, you're hitting on some of the key elements of however you call it, portable identity. It goes by lots of names. The examples that you gave all come down to using different words. You use efficiency, I'll say speed. And one of the roots of this technology is the ability to flip trust as a cost of doing business to a benefit of doing business. You mentioned being at the intersection of technology and business. When I was switching careers and planning out a few years in advance, that's why this technology really resonated to me. It was the first time that I'd really seen technology and business so integrated before, and I just knew whatever I was going to do next, that's an area of high interest, and that's an area of where I wanted to go. So, if you think about trust, when trust goes down in a system, these days, the problem is we're relying on a lot of large players that sell products in the SaaS market. They're centralized, they're honeypots. If there's one hiccup, it can affect an entire institution's supply chain or an entire industry all at once. That's bad. So trust is actually going down. AI is sort of gasoline on the fire because that's moving at light speed, and AI is the bad guys are using AI to spoof, the existing systems that are out there today.
So we sort of have the legacy inefficiencies of an internet architecture that was never really designed to, have a way of identifying humans or organizations. It was only ever designed for computers to share information. So we have those legacy problems and the kind of workarounds from them. That all creates friction, cost, and now we have new sources of potential uncertainty, as in biometrics and in AI, especially around what have been called deep fakes. So Tom, how do you see, from the perspective of somebody who eliminated noise and uncertainty by, working in a company that created a better way of analyzing faces, where do you see the blockages and the obstacles for a company now in getting either a person or information from point A to point B?
So if I kind of summarize, I think a little bit of what Will was saying, I think that this movement from identity really and trust as a cost to one as an economic benefit is reliant on three main things. It's users controlling their credentials, verification happening instantly at the edge, and businesses having the ability to verify without taking on liability. And inherent to that is there's no or less passenger or individual end user liability because you don't have to give your data to a large centralized repository. So if you take those three things in mind, and Will, if I didn't summarize some of what you were saying there, succinctly, let me know. But if you take those three things in mind, our current system in this space doesn't really have any of those. Identity verification systems today are disparate. They're not interoperable across hardware systems. On the software side, they're not privacy by design, meaning that they aren't built to be able to erase personally identifiable information and protect PII, and as a result, civil liberties from the ground up. So they inherently require the use of centralized either repositories or a centralized authority in order to provide ultimately the verification. And so this has a number of risks for the companies that have to take and store that data breaches, hacks, et cetera. It has risks to end users like any of us who want to leverage those services. And then inherently it has additional risk because when you start to have large centralized repositories of data, in most countries, you're going to have regulation around that. So companies have to walk through the regulatory side of these things, which costs additional time and money and can be a barrier to technical development. Those are two. One, it's not it, or really three. Let's call it two. Let's just put these two together. The systems aren't interoperable. They're disparate. You have one technology OEM that's going to try to require you to use a certain system or a certain format, and separate software systems over here. And so if you want to create a network effect, it's very challenging in the current system. And most of the technologies and the folks operating in this space, particularly in the travel industry as an example, but I believe also in fintech and others, they're not building with a privacy by design perspective. And frankly, that's preventing a lot of American companies, when we talk about the business development part of this conversation, from doing business in places like the EU with GDPR and other legislation that they have coming out. Additionally, the broken systems that we have today, because they aren't interoperable, they have additional costs. If you want to truly leverage a full-scale identity verification system today, you either have to build it yourself, which means you have to find all the expertise, spend all the time, all the money, and have the right employees maintaining it, or you have to buy pieces of technology, parts of your system from multiple vendors, creating vendor risk or dispersing vendor risk, because any one of those single vendors can be a choke point, requiring more contracting and other back office work, additional regulatory work, um, more than one throat to choke when you have a problem. And all of your IT teams, even if you haven't built it yourself, your IT teams need to know the integrations and be able to work on the integrations across the entire ecosystem with all of these different vendors. So your costs go up drastically as an end user client, end user company trying to deploy a traditional identity verification system when compared to a single proven network that can offer all of this within one ecosystem built on open source standards that the entirety of the world can test themselves and see in great detail.
Will, do you want to respond to that, or?
Uh, uh, Totally tracking with that. Much better said than I did, Tom. Um, it's the technology is being adopted now. It's interesting that it's being adopted more outside the United States than within the United States right now. Tom, you spent some time with DHS, so you have a lot of inside baseball on why that element might be. But I love that you touched upon what an enterprise has to go through in piecing together multiple identity solutions, or elements of identity verification solutions that just add cost and cost and cost. Because I came out of the defense intelligence sector, government contracting, we experienced and I saw so much time spent on compliance. Compliance for all good reasons. But after an organization spends the time and energy and cost on that, there's not enough left to really serve why that compliance was there in the first place. So, a government contractor will get nicked if they're not compliant. They might not be able to bid on new contracts. They're getting nicked in their reputation and their post-contract awards. If there's a security breach that exposes hundreds and thousands or millions, other than only their reputation, they're not really getting nicked as much. I would love to hear more comments from you, Tom, on the DHS and the U.S. perspective, and what you see might be happening going forward, or might be attractive going forward.
Sure, I'm happy to provide some initial thoughts, and I'll say, of course, up front, as every former government employee says, I'm not speaking on behalf of any agency or department, and I'm certainly well removed at this point. I've been out for over 5 years, but with Pangeum, we stayed very close to that mission. A number of our clients were federal government clients, so I'm a little more relevant than 5 years ago, but again, not speaking on behalf of anybody else. And what I'll say here is, if we take this at 30,000 feet, the evolution of technology, like digital identity in general, biometrics in general, AI in general, is moving so fast and at such great speed that not just the private sector, which moves much faster than the US government or any government for that matter, but inherently governments around the world will struggle to keep up. You almost have to not only be able to execute flawlessly and move just as fast as any Fortune 100 company to really take advantage of where technology is going. But with the speed of technological evolution, you almost need to be clairvoyant as well. You need to know what's coming and start taking the steps before others do, if you really want to be on the absolute cutting edge. And the reality is that that's impossible for any company to do. Nobody, even the most cutting edge companies, are not fully taking advantage of the absolute, most expeditious deployment of technology as it comes comes to bear. It's simply because we're moving faster than we ever have before with some of these major developments, and not just one development like the internet, but many on top of each other, kind of compounding. So let's frame with that at 30,000 feet, and then dive down to 20,000 feet and talk about the U.S. government. Let's talk about TSA and Customs and Border Protection in particular. These travel and border security use cases. Both of these organizations are actually, from a policy perspective, going back to the 9/11 Commission, the 9/11 report. They are some of the earliest in the world to start talking about deploying biometrics, and as a result, leading into digital identity. And they've really set a foundational premise for the rest of the world. You're seeing some really interesting frictionless travel opportunities at airports in other parts of the world today, where you don't ever present a document depending on the flight you're on. And the United States isn't quite there, but getting close in many instances. And the point I make here relative to your question about the US government, Will, is those countries and airports that are doing this internationally in this travel sector are doing it because they're building off the shoulders of giants, if you will, the work that TSA and Customs and Border Protection did in the biometric space, and incorporating biometrics and digital identity into their workflows over the course of the past 2 decades. And when we recognize that, I think it's important to then go down 15,000 feet and say, how or why are some of these foreign airports and foreign ecosystems perhaps today moving a little faster, or looking like they're moving a little faster than airports in the United States and the US market in general, as well as the European markets? And the answer is a really fundamental one to anybody that wants to think about doing corporate good, public benefit corporation here, right? As well as wants to talk about bottom line to a business. And that is, those companies and countries are able to operate in a faster manner today because they're building off of foundational building blocks that we did in the United States government and United States industry over the course of multiple years. But they're doing it now, they're evolving today without the same concerns or protections for privacy, individual liberty, and individual control of data that we still have a large focus on in loosely called the Western world. And so today, we have a lot of really impressive innovation by TSA, by CBP, by European and Canadian counterparts, leveraging digital identity, biometrics in general. We have to, our colleagues in government, our civil servants, have the challenge of bringing those technologies that are evolving rapidly in the private sector and in research institutions, as we said, into a policy and operational framework within the government that requires congressional oversight, requires lots of regulation to make sure that this is done correctly in a way that we as a society and the citizens voting for our government will be comfortable with in the long term. And so where does CBP and TSA go in the future? Well, they've been leading the charge for many, many years. They've been creating new technologies and implementing them into the workflow and demonstrating to the rest of the world how this can be done. And they're going to continue to do so. Where the next step for them, I believe, is better understanding how a trust network can be deployed holistically across an ecosystem, as opposed to an individual piece of the network or piece of the verification system being deployed directly by them. And so I think today, and I apologize for the long answer, but I think it's important to set that framework of why we are where we are today in this industry. I think today, the next major revolution for governments is taking the technologies that are proven to work and provide operational efficiency, and then leveling up to leverage the network that decreases cost across the board while still doing this the right way, focusing on individual rights and individual protection of data.
So many points there, and just one thing that comes up is how much is GDPR framing what the possible range of technological implementations?
Yeah, I'll respond briefly, just to say, in my experience in my industry and the industries I touch on, I don't think Americans are fully tracking the implications as yet, right? It's not just it's also the European digital wallet, right? If you're a multinational, you're an American multinational, you want to do business in Europe in this space, you need to comply with GDPR. if you're going to be in the digital wallet space, you're going to need to comply with forthcoming regulations that others on this line could talk in greater detail about than I can. And I don't know that all American companies have fully processed that. I've talked to some really big US companies in this space, a couple of whom I know can't break into the European market because they're not built GDPR compliant privacy by design from the ground up. And they're aware, but the smaller, mid-sized, the technologies that are evolving, I think we have an awareness problem. And I think that's a big part of what Indicio can help solve with events like this, but also, with the nature of the proven network being interoperable across systems, across governments, across governance programs, on both sides of the Atlantic and both sides of multiple different oceans, frankly.
Not to dominate, but please, anybody who wants to ask a question, you can write it in the chat channel, or you can put your hand up and speak directly. But there's so much here that there's so many different ways to take this conversation. But one of the things that I'm curious about is, what does it really mean practically for a company? So, right, there's the big compliance, sort of expand the trust network. So we have business like the railroads, we can do business across all different geographic spaces. But in real practical terms, so, we talk about verifiable data, we talk about portable identity. What does it mean for a company that now we can put authenticated biometrics, we can put them in a verifiable credential, make them tamper-proof, bind them to a person, and enable biometric authentication without having to store biometric data? What does that mean in a practical business sense for somebody wanting to use biometrics? Apologies if that's really putting you on the spot, but that's my question.
I'll start it, and Tom will say it much better than I will, I'm sure. So right now, some listeners may know Dr. Chase Cunningham, also known as Dr. Zero Trust. One of the things that he has elevated the conversation on, and he speaks with government leaders quite a bit, is that the SaaS model is sort of broken right now. Software has been delivered in the same model, while some enterprises like the SaaS model because they know exactly what their costs are going to be, and that is certainly very important. What portable identity does is allow a digital transformation from that SaaS model that most players are using towards a transaction model. So inherent in that is the ability for institutions who are adopting this technology to be on a path to reduce their costs over time, while at the same time increasing their value to their bottom line, or speed and efficiency and convenience for their customers. Our discussion today is really about the business element of this business technology kind of hybrid. So from that standpoint, and at an enterprise, if you're a BD team or a capture team going after a proposal for a government institution or a government agency, or it's for an airport or a border control, you're competing with other players. So you have to be able to speak about the benefits and features of the technology in the most simplest terms, which is flipping trust from a cost to an asset. But you also have to really elevate the discussion on the technology element. And we're not getting into that in the discussion today, but in its simplest term, and back to your great point about how much technology has come out of the US, Tom, I love that. And one of those is zero trust technology, or zero trust architecture. That came out of DoD way back 20, 30 years ago, splintered into another initiatives. And these days, modern zero trust has an extra layer, zero trust overlays. So portable identity is effectively a zero trust overlay. So if you're a BD person, you need to talk about the business part and the features and benefits, breaking SaaS, getting to transactions, reducing costs. But you still have to have that foundation in security. And you just have to know how to language it correctly in the language of, if you're a government agency, what they understand.
Yeah, I think that's all really well said, and I love the point about the zero trust coming out of the DoD ecosystem. I mean, it's just like the internet, right? And GPS. These are all really important things to highlight in terms of the innovation that's going on in the U.S. sector, even as, like I said, interoperable um, or more full functioning deployments of some of the identity systems do happen, at least in the travel industry and other parts of the world. Um, it's not because they were built there. It's because they leveraged up, and we're still doing, I think, building these things the right way. I'd give an example, a particular example here, Trevor, on industry implication from an airline perspective. I was recently talking with an airline that I've known well and done some work for in the past about how they wanted to be able to provide a touchless experience across their passenger um, population at one of their key hubs. And not only was it challenging to follow all the developments in this sector because it's moving so fast, as we've already highlighted, but they really didn't want to have anything to do with storing and maintaining personally identifiable information because it's a risk in general, because it creates cost, because it's a risk to their passengers, and because there's regulation around it once you start doing it, for all the things that we highlighted kind of at the top of the call. So then you're a major international airline and you want to be able to provide these services that others are providing elsewhere, but you can't maybe handle that across all those bridges that I just mentioned in a very succinct time frame because of internal bureaucracy, because of cost, because of just general risk concerns. How do you solve that? How do you give your passengers these better experiences that already exist elsewhere? Um, but you can't get across the internal challenges. Well, what you do is you rely on a trust network that allows you to get rid of those costs, to pass those liabilities elsewhere, and still be able to deliver those services to your passengers. And so I'd say that's one of the biggest potential revolutions that's coming when you adopt uh, and utilize a trust network like what we've built at Indicio, the proven network. You can deliver these services. You can leverage biometrics. You can leverage digital identity without having any of those risks or costs associated with you because we're leveraging an open source protocol that's visible to everyone around the world and can be touched, tested, tried out by anybody who wants to. And if you're leveraging the network, you've done so and you've determined that this is sufficient for your use cases. So I think that is one of the major implications here. And I think it highlights maybe that particular airline I'm giving as an example can highlight how revolutionary this could be. You can actually start incorporating this technology holistically and getting the benefits to your passengers without having the risks that previously have been associated.
It's also, I mean, it's also, we talk about this technology as a, sort of reshaping the way information is shared across, economy and business. But it's also empowering, small and medium businesses. Like for instance, if they replace, single sign-on with a verifiable credential, they suddenly have state-of-the-art security and privacy, access management that would otherwise be too expensive for them to implement. And so, what is the sense of how would your sense of this technology as, not just removing all the obstacles in an information network that can disrupt things, all those different players and businesses and services that you have to use to get something from point A to point B. In what sense is this is this a technology for disintermediation that really enables information to travel in the shortest possible direction in transactions. So, for instance, you want to, especially if you combine, with AI search, you're able to go directly to any source, any other business to do business. Whether as, or any business as a consumer, you don't need to have your identity managed or even your search managed. So what kind of do you agree with this that this is this really scales from the smallest business to sort of massive exchanges? And what do you think the impact is going to be on the broader economy?
I'll go ahead and start. I think the biggest value is at the enterprise and institution. Large, mature supply chains, software supply chains, where everything is really connected. That said, I've seen a lot of interesting small teams, lean bootstrap companies, venture-backed startup companies that embrace this portable identity technology in sometimes at their MVP stage and sometimes just a little bit later because as they prepare to scale, they know that they really need it. You mentioned Tom, this being an open protocol, that is a key part of this interoperability. Everybody knows what is going on. Open protocol, the one we all know best is email service. But that really opens up the possibility and feasibility that interoperability will be more naturally evolved together. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or getting sidetracked, but I really feel like that the biggest value is at the enterprise level. But there is some really, really interesting, exciting stuff coming up from small business too.
But I think I like that point. Well, I think that for enterprises can potentially cut significant cost out of their ecosystem by leveraging a verifiable credential ecosystem, pardon me, and network. Without a doubt. We've highlighted a number of ways in which they can do so. I agree that there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the small business as well, but I'm going to double down on the small business point and say this to the point a moment ago about the airline I was talking about. That's a big airline, but not one of the biggest in the world. One of the biggest in the world may, to the best of my knowledge, most of the US ones aren't, but they may decide to take on the risk of using current systems and creating centralized databases. They have the capital to do so. Maybe they can think they can handle the regulatory, et cetera. Smaller competitors in their space, they're just priced out of it right now. So you could be a sizable company, but not one of the biggest in your industry, or you could be a very small company, and effectively you're priced out of leveraging digital identity as it currently exists for all the reasons we said. Not interoperable, too many choke points, too much integration work, too much regulatory concern and then the risk of actual a data loss. If you can create a network effect where enough of your customers or your end users or your partners are leveraging the same network as you, then you, no matter who you are, whether you're that mid-size airline or you're a very small startup business, can start offering digital identity to your end users, to your customers, to your passengers from day one. And I think that's really compelling because that allows the small businesses that are usually doing the most cutting edge, innovative things in their field to really start playing on an even playing field and getting into the mix here. And, so that's a benefit to small businesses. Another benefit I would say would be to the individual end users, to you, me, you, Will, Trevor, myself, everybody else on this call. If you have all of your data in your own wallet, you have a network effect where you can use your wallet wherever you go, and you can choose who gets access to which line item or which element of information. Your data starts to have value. You can choose what data to provide to people for what incentives you want in return. Instead of being essentially having a gun pointed at your head and saying, if you want this service in this location, you have to give us everything. And that is a much more equitable and frankly appropriate way that personal identifiable information should be leveraged not only here and in Europe, but really across the world. I mean, I'm going to go outside of my space right now and say I find it personally offensive that in order to use this type of technology to pay my taxes in the United States, I have to give my data to a private sector company. I think Americans should be outraged by that. And I know that company well and I like them, but I don't think that's an appropriate policy position we should all be in. Same thing in the travel sector, right? This should be something that we can use ubiquitously, all of us, of our own discretion. It is our information after all, and we shouldn't have these artificial barriers to entry. I think it's where the industry is going, and I think that as more and more people become aware of it, we will adapt.
I think that's particularly resonant with the kind of innovation we're hearing about, or that's desired in the financial sector, particularly around the use of AI agents to sort of create unity for the customer and actually to turn the customer into a unified concept by being able to merge all these the data from all these disparate departments and databases together, analyze it and provide new ways of solving problems. And it all sounds fantastic. All of nobody loves dealing with their bank online. And all of this can become effortless and simple, and you can be prompted with products that can solve problems and risk analysis and financial analysis, and it can all be done on your phone. But I just don't see how that happens if people don't trust the AI agent, that they're actually dealing with the AI agent that belongs to their bank, and the bank can be absolutely certain that they're dealing with their customer, and there's a way to permission that data exchange. And so that sort of permission data access, I think, possibly this is where we get to the idea of trust as an asset, is that you can now sort of create new levels of personalization that are equitable, and you can turn your device into the mobile device suddenly has all the power of a server using an API, but with much better security. And suddenly this device, enables you to be a first-class citizen on what used to be called the information superhighway, businesses can benefit from having this permissioned access, and of course the customer benefits because they can trust the business. I mean, I was really struck by a survey in Nature Communications which showed that people who are fearful of the existential risks of biometric technology can be assured if they know the technology is secure, and that they can trust, they can trust their data. So this trust economy can really be accelerated in ways that really benefit consumers and business and government. The question is, obviously, I think the businesses that recognize this are going to be the winners in this new economy, in this new sort of verifiable data economy. But I know we've got a question, but if anybody wants to respond to that, and then I'll bring in Novak's question in a moment.
Well, I'll just respond very briefly by saying it's not only what you think and what I think. I think that the facts highly support this, right? And we're not just now reading tea leaves about where we think society or technology is going to go. We have legislation in the EU. We have legislation in California. We have legislation in multiple smaller jurisdictions in the United States that require these sorts of privacy by design capabilities. And I go back to this point. If you're a multinational or you're an American company with aspirations of being a multinational, you better find, you better find truth on this very quickly if you want to have access to European markets tomorrow or 10 years from now, whatever your time frame might be. Because if you aren't GDPR compliant, if you're leveraging wallets and you're not built to their standards, you won't be able to make that break across the Atlantic. And that's just the reality. So I don't really, I think generally speaking, at least in my industry, when people are building products and offerings in the identity verification space that aren't taking that into account, most of the time, what I'm hearing from them is not, oh, we disagree with you. We don't think the industry is going that way. It's either, oh, I wasn't really aware. I hadn't thought that through. Or frankly, Tom, my focus here is on delivering results for Q2, Q3. The farthest in advance I can think is Q4. Thinking out 24 months is a little bit above my pay grade. So, okay, well, let me talk to your boss's boss. And we have that conversation and they go, that's a good point. But most people, most companies aren't going to make the change until they start feeling the pain, frankly. And so the benefit of our potential customers and our clients who are listening right now is make the changes now, build from the ground up fundamentally, and you will be ahead in your industry, almost guaranteed if you're multinational working in the EU within 12 months.
And it's not just the EU itself, is that the rest of the world wants to be compliant with the EU.
100%.
So it's not as if, you can say, well, do we really want the European market? We've got Africa, we've got Asia, we've got Southeast Asia. No, everybody, they're all moving. They're even moving faster, I would say. Like India's moving so fast. Asia is moving so fast. It's actually Europe is going to be catching up to sort of Africa, India, Southeast Asia. And it's not just, so you're not just getting the EU market, you're getting an evolving global market around interoperability.
Well said. Well said.
Do you want to direct a question, or shall I direct the speakers to look at what you've written?
No,
There
that's
you
quite all
appeared
right.
smiling, so I guess the answer is you're going to speak. Welcome.
So yeah, and I apologize. My name is Michael.
Michael,
Me
okay.
Novak. That's my nom de Zoom.
Yeah, Michael.
Hey. So thanks, Tom. This has been great. My background is working in enterprise technology. I live in the Maryland, Virginia corridor. So as Will knows, I bump into people in the public sector occasionally. And, I'm very excited by what I see happening today in the last 24 to 36 months, because people are becoming more conscientious of, oh, that is important. I don't want a deep fake to steal my identity, etc. So I'm telling you already know, but this is what I hear as well. Recently, within the AI world, there's been a surge in something called MCP, if you've heard about this. It's a new technical architecture so that AI agents can discover the services of other AI agents without knowing where they are. Sort of like what we did with the web back in the days of, hey, I need a DNS server to find me something and I don't know where the heck it is. What I see is identity as a service. I want to do business with Trevor, but not Will. So therefore, go find me that service and just have it be self-identified. It tells me what it can and can't do, and I choose it. And I don't have to worry about what's that API call, how do I maintain it, etc. So this is why I'm excited, because I see that convergence of the technologies, but also the business reasons. Why would I want to do this? Like Trevor mentioned, it's not infrastructure I have to worry about. I can outsource that with reasonable certainty. There's security in place. There's governance in place. If there's bad actors, I have recourse. And my clients get the benefit because it reduces that workflow friction for them to talk to the airlines, talk to the commercial businesses, even do peer-to-peer business with people I want to. That's my speech for the day. But
Thank you.
I'm curious, Tom, what you think. Have you heard about this new protocol, or do you have any thoughts on it? Or
Well, I saw Will nodding his head, so maybe I'll defer to Will first.
Oh, I am definitely not expert, but I have been following MCP, also RAG as well. And it goes back to one of the points Tom and Trevor made. AI is just moving so fast, and the deep fakes, whether it's voice or video, are way ahead. I know, Michael, you've spent a good deal of your career in the voice element. If anybody's has a Schwab account or a Fidelity account, Schwab, it's my voice is my password. Fidelity uses that too. Those are on top of the core know your customer identity attributes that are needed. What they're doing is building a trust score on you to you just add more and more attributes to elevate that trust score to verify whether you are who you say you are. What the beauty of this technology and why I think a lot of us in the community get so excited about it is it brings the business and the business element together with the technology, nice and clean and elegant. They complement each other, and that's really not happened in this way before.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Again, it's the technology, and business people don't care if you're using COBOL 68 or some new language. They just want to know, hey, number one, can my customers access my services? Number two, is my organization, my firm, safe in all of its operations, period? Can you reduce my costs, increase my revenue, and maintain that security and safety of my infrastructure? That's all they care about, no matter what technology is used. Under the covers now, it's like, yes, I can see again with the portable identity, this is happening. You may have read either yesterday or this week, the US Congress passed the law for deep fakes, where people were taking my body and putting Will's face on top of it and posting it to social media, and there was no laws to prevent that. And they finally came up and passed a law to now put that on the books. You can't do this. That's great, because from a business perspective, that's good, but also from that governance and the citizenry now know, oh, there is a way for me to protect my personal data. So that's where I'm very bullish on what's going on, that within DCO and other companies focused on this and coming out with the solutions and the platforms. And Tom, certainly with your firm as well, this is now the time for companies to have one less excuse to say, no, I'll just wait till next budget year and maybe come up with a pilot and maybe get around to it.
Well,
They're very good on it.
As VP of governance in DCO, I have to say the secret sauce in all of this is decentralized ecosystem governance that enables all these trust issues and these complex workflows to be handled so simply and elegantly and quickly, enabling decisions to be made at the level where the people who are most responsible can make them. So this is it's like a sort of an entire network architecture upgrade, right? We're Marie Kondoing all the mess, the things that aren't lovely about our current system, and we're making it simple and elegant and fast and secure and private. That's my closing thought as we head into the final 3 minutes. Very briefly, Tom and Will, if you have a closing thought, or thank you for so many interesting comments. But if you have a closing thought now, this is your moment.
I would say on the topic of portable identity, Michael mentioned identity as a service. I kind of think of this as trust as a service, and trust as a service flips cost of verification to new revenue streams, new potential cost savings. It's all in the way that you look at it. And as you're developing, a response to a proposal, it's just really important to elevate this concept because it's just so fundamental on why this business technology is so impactful. It's already happening now, and it's going to happen at scale.
And I'd speak directly to the business development audience that we know is listening in a little bit today and on recording, and I'd say if you're a digital identity manager or you are a product manager who has responsibility for bringing aviation into your ecosystem, and in particularly around individual-based services or industries like travel, but fintech and other financial services as well. And you want a pat on the back from your boss, you want to be seen as a visionary leader, you want to help your company open up to markets that they're not currently open to and get ahead of the trend. This is the conversation to be having now. Decentralized, verifiable trust networks. And we'd love to help you do it.